Good evening, everybody. Thank you for attending our meeting tonight. The school committee may seek to convene into open session and recess to executive session for discussion and action or action regarding those items of business that stem from open meeting under General Law 4246-4, a discussion and action NEASK, recess duty operation appeals, Rhode Island General Law 4246-5A2, a discussion action NEASK negotiations, Rhode Island General Law 4246-5A2, discussion action potential litigation, demand for reimbursement for educational expenses, Rhode Island General Law 4246-5A2. Do we have a motion to convene?
I'll make a motion to convene an executive session.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes. Okay, good evening, everybody. I want to bring the meeting to order. I do apologize for the late start. So, Mr. Bradley Share.
Here.
Mr. James Festivo.
Here.
Miss Carol Better. Miss Melissa Boyd.
Here.
Miss Kate Massinesi is here present. Miss Michelle Busso
Here.
and myself, Paula Whitford, here. Please join us in the pledge of allegiance to the flag. I'd like to ask for a motion to seal the minutes in executive session.
The motion to seal the minutes of executive session.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'd like to disclose there was no votes taken in the executive session tonight. And we will move on to item 3, which is community comments.
I got it.
Good evening, Doral Beasley. So, you're gonna get a report this evening from the superintendent on the assessment tests and testing and the school accountability reports. I looked them over again this week. I contacted Scott Goslin, the data center at RIDE, asked him about teacher absenteeism scores, and was told that what you see in this report this year are the adjusted scores. So yes, we went from a 22% chronic teacher absenteeism to 10, little over 10. Now it's a big drop, but 10 is still 3 to 4 times higher than Barrington, Exeter, West Greenwich, Narragansett. 3 and 4 times higher. Still not good enough. As a matter of fact, if I was on the negotiating committee for the new teachers contract, I'd probably say to the other side, you know, prove to the parents and the taxpayers of South Kingstown that your members can show up to work on a regular basis so that number is under 5%, which is where it should be. If you want the maximum 3 points on that metric, you need to be below 5%. Prove to us you can be below 5%. Then we'll talk about a raise. Now, the year before the pandemic, our budget for substitutes was $127,000. That's 2018, 2019. It was $127,000. It's gone up 344% since then. In 2021, 22, it was $673,000. And last year was $680,000. So that's when when the classroom teacher's not in that room, those students suffer. That's it. And unfortunately, probably our school with the least with the highest percentage still, which is West Kingston, over 17.5, which that's 15. The high threshold number is 15. So that school has last year had chronic teacher absenteeism. Hopefully this year it's better, but that's a school with a lot of the kids in that school, they can't afford to have their teachers not be there. The only other thing I want to talk about tonight is, I've been going to a lot of the school building school building committee meetings, and I'm a proponent of South Kingston building a net zero school. A net zero school is one where the energy you consume has a net zero effect on the carbon emissions. So the way you get there in this part of the country is from geothermal heating and cooling, which requires that a certain number of wells be dug into the ground. They go to 300 or 400 feet into the ground. Studio J did they contacted a company that's done that work, and they projected that for the size of our high school, the new high school, they would need 70 wells drilled. They're spaced 20 feet apart, so it's not that big a footprint. And then below the surface of the earth, the temperature below the surface of the earth is a steady about 55 degrees. So what happens is there's like a ethylene glycol liquid in the pipes that go up and down. And in the cold part of the year, when that liquid is circulated into the building and the heat exchangers, it extracts the heat out of there and it heats the building, and then it reverses the effect when it gets hot outside. So a little higher upfront cost, but if you projected the amount of money it would cost over the next 20, 30, 40 years on what we have to pay for natural gas, I think it's a no-brainer. Plus the fact that RIDE is part of a consortium in New England that mandates now that our schools are green schools. And there's a lot of funding from the Department of Energy, from the manufacturers of the systems that do this, that go into the buildings. So I'm really hoping, what I've been hoping for from the school building committee is I'm still waiting for, yes, we're going to do this from the group. And I hope to hear that soon. So, because that's the way we need to go.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley.
At this time, I think we'll close the community comments and move on to the next item on our agenda, which is our consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report. I will pass that over to Superintendent Mr. Littlefield.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. First of all, just a quick note on communication on foul weather, because we've had a couple of incidents recently. I'm not unaware of the chatter that about our communication about delays to our start days. My wife returned from Belmont Market, and she said, I went up and down the aisle. I went up one aisle, and they said that, and she overheard a conversation. That superintendent is an idiot. He only called a 1 hour delay. I went to another aisle. They said that superintendent is an idiot. He didn't cancel school. And then another aisle, it was that superintendent is an idiot. He didn't call a 2 hour delay. She came home and said, well, everybody agrees on one thing. You are an idiot. I have discovered that being a superintendent, there brings with it certain challenges, and one is making the call about foul weather. And I do want you to know that I was out on the roads at each time, testing them myself to see if a delay or cancellation is necessary. And I've communicated with Mr. Mahoney and with the superintendents of surrounding different districts. We walk a fine line. And I just want to make it clear that a delay in our school day is still upsetting instruction, whether it's a 1 hour or a 2 hour. So I'm hesitant to do it unless it's absolutely necessary, and won't hesitate to do it if it is, because it is a disruption to our day, and canceling a day means we'll make up the day in the heat of June. So that's to be avoided. I do want folks to know that we utilize the Rhode Island Broadcasters Association to send out messages, and we also utilize robocalls. What I have discovered is that our phone calls out that happen at 5:30 in the morning are only programmed to go to one phone number. And that would be the primary number in a student's account. So we've made adjustments, and now those phone calls will go out to the primary number and to the secondary number. Anyone who doesn't answer the phone will have to rely on those announcements or through social media. But I do want to urge and we sent out a message today to families to say, if you're not getting these calls, check with your school to make sure that we have the correct phone numbers for you for your primary or your secondary number. And we just hope that the weather for the rest of the year is going to be accommodating. I've got some professional development news I want to share. And I'm pleased to inform that in collaboration with Dr. Teresa Deeney from University of Rhode Island, we have entered into a partnership to enroll 8 of our teachers in the URI graduate certificate in dyslexia knowledge and practice. All the funding for this comes through our Title II funds. It's a comprehensive program. There are 4 graduate level courses that include a practicum designed to enhance our educators' understanding of and proficiency in diagnosing and addressing dyslexia. We had 8 teachers step up, and they'll begin the program this week. Tonight is their first night. We're enthusiastic about them bringing the knowledge and skills that they will acquire that are going to ultimately benefit our students. This is something we are excited about. Okay. So that's a positive step that our teachers are taking to address this need. On attendance, I told you at the quarter mark of the school year that I would keep you appraised of our attendance data, and we are just a couple of days away from our halfway mark. So I asked our staff in the central office to generate a report on teachers and students who are tracking toward chronic absenteeism. So that would be for both teachers and students. That would be at the halfway point. If you have 9 or if you have more than 9 absences, you are tracking toward being classified as chronically absent. We have at West Kingston School 5.6 of our students, at Peacedale Elementary School 13.1 of our students, at Matunic Elementary 7.5, at the high school 16.5, and at Broad Rock 14.9. These show that our schools are headed toward either earning two out of 3 points on student absenteeism, or perhaps 3 out of 3 points. On teacher absenteeism, those in the central office know that this is a priority for me. One, to encourage that we have our teachers in front of our students as often as possible, but 2, to make sure that the data we are reporting to RIDE on teacher absenteeism is accurate. I will tell you, I reviewed attendance data for 57 of our teachers that propped up in this report, and found that we are reporting to RIDE teachers who have been absent for conferences and for professional development and for jury duty, and for showing up late some mornings, or leaving school for an appointment some afternoons. So I want to make sure that our data are correct. Right now, we are tracking toward somewhere between 10 and 12% of our teachers being chronically absent. I will point out to you that the period from Thanksgiving to Christmas was a crucial period that, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate, that there was a lot of illness that went around, and our teachers were not immune to that. I will continue to work with our tech staff, our technology staff, to make sure that our data being reported to RIDE is accurate and within the parameters of their regulation. So I will keep you posted. I'll report to you again at the 3/4 point of the year. On assessment data, school report cards were released to the public on January 5th. 2 of our schools, the high school and Matunic Elementary, rated 4 out of 5 stars. All of our other schools were rated at 3 stars. And I've asked Ms. Meyer to give us a more detailed report on the progress of our schools. I would ask you, and she's probably going to mention this as well, be mindful of these things, that school quality ratings are based on a year's worth of data: attendance, suspensions, credentials earned by students in the high school. Those are year-long collections of data. The RICAS, the PSAT, the SAT are but a snapshot in time. They represent a couple of hours taken during the course of a 180 school year. So, and also a school's star rating, whether it's a 1 star or a 5 star, it can only be as high as your lowest sub score. So we could have a school, we could have schools and we do that, that would be in the 5-star category for all of the subgroups except for one where that was a 4. And then so the overall rating for that school is a 4. Mrs. Meyer will explain everything in detail.
Good evening, members of the school committee, Madam Chair, Mr. Pollack, Superintendent Littlefield. I have presented or prepared for you an overview of our school data, district data. There's quite a few slides here and I, just am here to provide you with a sort of a higher level overview and help you to understand what data is available and how we use it in the district. I'm going to cover where to access district and state data, review of district assessments, SAT, RICAS, the science assessment, and then I'll do the district report card and school ratings. It's important to note that there are other assessments that are administered to students. For example, our multilingual learners for the access testing or the DLM for our students that are most differently abled students in the district. On this slide, you will find where I pulled all the data and where you can access the public data. Those links are live. I pulled everything from the public portal that is in this presentation. However, there is a district portal or access that we would have as educators to the district where we can drill down to student data. But this, you have access to all of this and I encourage you to go take a look at it. I'm going to move to the South Kingstown High School PSAT results. In this chart that I made, I did a comparison of the 2 years, 2021 and 22 and 2022 and 2023. As you can see in this slide, I mean, I think it certainly is something to celebrate that, 80% of our students are meeting or exceeding the standard in ELA for our PSAT students. And remember, those are our 10th grade students that take that assessment. The next page gives you a view of some of the subgroup data that we can look at. And I covered up, even though this was in the public portal, some of these numbers were quite low, so I sort of blocked that out. But I mean, this is data that isn't unusual in other districts, but something that we need to be focused on. I pulled the subgroup data in this slide for our economically disadvantaged students and those that are not economically disadvantaged, and what the difference between those students that are meeting and exceeding. Same in the bottom slide, and you can see there's a significant difference between those subgroups and the performance of all students. And I do want to reiterate what Mr. Littlefield said. It is a moment in time, and let's remember that. It is good data. It is important data. It helps us to understand what our students know and are able to do, but it isn't the only defining moment of success for our students. PSAT mathematics is the next slide. You can see there isn't a difference certainly between the, percentage of students that are meeting and exceeding. But, it's solidly, from a statistical perspective, pretty much consistent from year to year. In this slide with the PSAT mathematics, you can see our not meeting students, we had an increase there, but our meeting and exceeding are stable. In this next slide where I pulled the subgroup data, the top slide is, our economically disadvantaged students. And again, the meeting and exceeding is a stark difference between all students and those that are economically disadvantaged. I selected, the gender on the bottom, and we can break this data down in many, many ways. Just as another example for you folks to look at and the community to look at as how we can drill down the data even further. Interesting to look at how our female students and our male students perform on the PSAT. Next slide, I think, is going to be, I can turn the page. The ELA results for South Kingstown High School. Again, something to really, be proud of, and not that there isn't room for improvement, but 75% of our students are meeting and exceeding on the SAT. Again, the data, if you look at it, pretty much stays stable. We have 20% of our students exceeding, and that's a good number. And that is another moment for celebration. I broke the data down, the subgroup data down, and our students with disabilities for the ELA, SAT, ELA. Again, the data is clear and consistent that, we have work to do on our subgroups. The bottom is our economically disadvantaged, and you can see it's fairly similar in terms of the distinction between students that are meeting and exceeding. So mathematics on the next slide, you guys are doing a great job. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. You can see that, the percentage of meeting and exceeding, that we have a little bit of a distinction between those 2 years. So, and you can, and in this slide, you can see too, those partially meeting did increase along with our not meeting. So that's something, an area of focus for the district and for the high school team. Again, subgroup data for economically disadvantaged for our high school students. And then in the bottom one, again, I did male and female students to break that data down. And again, the subgroups tell a story, and our data tells us that story. I did a comparison with like districts or, districts in the area and similar demographics. And that's a slide for us to take a look at and see where we fall as a district between and among other districts around us, or with a similar demographic. So, again, that PSAT ELA, the ELA is an area of something that we have strong performance of our students, and, mathematics is in some area that we can focus on. And I know it's a lot of information, so stop me if you have any questions, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a brief overview. The next
Ms.
slide is the
Ms. Meyer,
RICAS summary.
Can I just ask you a
Of
question?
course,
Do all our high school students take the SAT?
11th grade.
11th grade, okay, but they all take.
They all take it. That's the
Thank-
state assessment now.
Okay, thank you. I knew that everybody took the PSAT. I didn't know where we went with the SAT. Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you for your question. Just, the 4 levels of achievement: exceeding, meeting, partially meeting, not meeting. I want to draw your attention to the cut scores and the bands. So, for meeting expectation, the scaled score is between 500 and 530. Another data point that becomes really important at the school level when principals and teachers are looking at the data, which they have been for quite a few months already, as the data was available, and taking a look at where students are scored related to the scaled score and how close they are if they're partially meeting to meeting. Next slide is a comparison of the RICAS ELA and mathematics, similar communities. I use the same communities there. As you can see, overall for our district, and this is overall, so 3 through 8, for our RICAS, 50% of our students are meeting or exceeding the standard in ELA and 47% in mathematics. Similar data in some of the other communities. Narragansett, for example, and North Kingstown, those are very close, and the data is, our numbers are close to those numbers. Next slide, I did a look at several years of data, beginning before COVID. That 2018 was the first year of the administration of the RICAS. And so if you start to look at that, and you can see we are getting back to pre-COVID levels. in many areas. And I'd like to look at the 2019 year because, you know, it was at least the second year of the administration of the RICAS. So it gives you another year under your belt, getting used to the assessment and all the parts of administering it. Next slide is the grade level, percentages of meeting or exceeding the standard. And that's a summary of each of the grade levels for ELA. Subgroup data is the next slide. And when you look at this slide, so access at the school level and the district level, we can actually get student level data right there. And, you know, if I clicked on that red, it would give students names and where they were, able to look at their scaled score, able to even drill down more and look at students' attendance. Lot of information that we could pull, which becomes very, very important when looking at our data and where our students are performing. So, you know, again, you know, loud and clear, our subgroup data is an area of focus for the district. What's this next slide? What is this? Well, the next slide says RICAS ELA again. So I must have done that twice. Okay, next slide. We'll move on to the next slide. I put this in here and you can actually, you know, this is again, publicly available. These are the item analysis reports, incredibly important information in looking at what our students know and are able to do. I can even look at this graph here and be able to tell you that I can tell you which one is a writing question without even really digging in because it's pretty consistent when you look from district to district, but I can do a comparative analysis on the state, on their districts, but drill down to the actual questions, seeing how students responded. And even in the writing ones, we can get actual the writing samples that the kids had done and use that information as well. Even using that information with the kids, giving them a copy of how they responded to that question and let them reflect on it a year later. Next slide is a comparison of the mathematics again, similar to the ELA, and I know I'm going through it quickly. So just to take a look at a sort of a longer analysis of, you know, how the district was performing, how students were performing, and where we are at this moment in time. There's the mathematics slide. So, you know, Mr. Littlefield and I took a look at this along with the other slides and you know, certainly our 8th grade students, you know, is an area that we need to have some eyes on and been looking at that number of our students where they're performing in grade 8.
The interesting thing to me with that is that cohort of kids are going to be the kids next year in the PSAT, SAT world, and the impacts of them not meeting will impact those grades, those assessments for the next couple of years. And then, but then going forward, these larger, these, you know, the 5, 6, 7, those will then move forward. So I think it'll be interesting because what we will get is, oh, you guys decreased next year. It's like, well, yeah, because if we look at the cohort, and so what we want to do is target that grade and make sure they're getting the supports next year so that that trend doesn't continue.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if I may, that's the essential work of our math interventionists who do just that, who are drilling down on these data to identify the students and get the interventions in place that they need.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield.
And these students, I'm looking specifically at the 8th graders. Those are our current 9th graders, right?
No,
2023 of,
that's our 9th graders.
so they took it in the spring of 23? Oh, okay.
The spring of, yes.
So our current 9th
Yeah,
graders.
so
So
they
those
come-
are the kids who should be getting targeted
Yeah.
support
Right,
Yeah.
okay. I just have to keep.
Yeah,
in
no,
mind.
you have to, you actually have to do it often. Ask yourself those questions when looking at the data. So next slide is, again, I pulled the subgroup data, so you had a sense of, what the type of data is that we're looking at. And the bottom chart, as just as an example for folks, I pulled, you can pull data based on race. And as you can see, we don't report in all of them, but good information, again, thinking about our subgroup kiddos. And this is the slide that I added in, and this is to your point, when you think about it and you're looking at, I was going to pull all the years, but for the purposes of this meeting. So, for example, when we start to look at cohorts of kids, in this chart, if we look at grade 3 in ELA in the 21-22 school year, right, 49%, those were the same students that took the assessment in the 4th grade. So you start to look at that cohort data and what does that cohort data mean? Important to look at. It's really quite interesting to follow cohorts, and it will be interesting to look at that 8th grade group and what that data looks like. Next one is the science assessment. This is the first year it's been poured over the report card. It's grade 5, 8, and 11. I just gave you the summary of, where they were meeting and exceeding, where our kids were, in a comparison of the 2 years. Interesting to note is, as there's a requirement with that Accountability Act of high quality curriculum. So in this district, we have ELA rated, high quality curriculum, mathematics, high quality curriculum. There is one middle school high quality curriculum that meets the RIDE criteria at this point. So they're using this NGSA assessment, but we don't have a rated or an approved high quality curriculum for science in any grades as yet. Okay, report card. This was a fascinating little endeavor because the report card, the annual star ratings are based on achievement, growth, English language proficiency was a very important piece for some districts this year, graduation rates, diploma plus, and school quality and success. So you would go to the report card prior to 4 days ago, and there would be this chart on that page, and the chart would have, circles with the appropriate star associated with them. So I had gotten all the way to this presentation, and I go and we received an email from the deputy commissioner, the RIDE deputy commissioner, saying that they had updated the report card. So I go to the page and I said, where's the chart? And notice where I have, oh, can you change that slide? Notice where I have the arrow. That is now where the star score is noted. You can barely. So I think I'm curious about that. I will say that much. Mr. Littlefield reported to you where the star scores were for each of the respective schools. I just repeat what he said. Your star score is based on your lowest achievement level. So this is the new rating. I do think there was an intentional piece here to make the star scores really small for some reason. I think it might be, well, as you notice, I'm looking at South Kingstown High School. We don't receive a score for our English language proficiency because we don't have enough of a subgroup for it to count. But there are high schools that do have it count. So the playing field isn't necessarily level. And when there were some high schools that went from a 4-star rating this year to a 2-star rating because of that category. So there was a little bit of, I think, conversation around that. But that, these are the measures. I screenshotted the other measures. You can drill down into this if you go to the report card, but it gives you an idea of how they came to the calculation. And it is really an involved calculation. Broad Rock Middle School is a 3-star school, but if you look at the slide for school quality and student success as an example, that's a 5-star level based on these measures. And then Matunic Elementary School, same thing, for their school quality, they are 5-star, but they are a 4-star rated school. And conversely, I'm just repeating, Peacedale and West Kingston are our 3-star schools. And that concludes the summary of the assessment data, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
A comment and then a question. I just wanted to thank you and our superintendent for sharing data where the community can't see it, but we're sitting behind signs that talk about data is our friend. And it's very often in my time sitting at the table that we haven't necessarily had this type of data presented to the school committee or to the community so transparently. So thank you. I'm fascinated to learn at the work that you've already done of drilling down and the cohort conversation. I think certainly ties into our school improvement teams, our equity audit. I'm very excited to see this conversation and continue forward as we look at our strategic plan. I'm wondering, and perhaps you can't answer tonight, what will be the next step now that we have this reported data? How might we, and we're aware of these key areas, how might we go about having continued discussions in the areas where we see a need for improvement?
Thank you for that feedback and thank you for your question. I can tell you those conversations are already happening. Myself, Dr. Borden, Ms. Lepley, who is the mathematics ELA coordinator at the elementary level. We attended a broadcast session last week. There's another one coming next week. They took us through drilling down the data but it's already happening at every school level. They've done some of this item analysis very, very deeply because that's really where the story is. That is where the story is. I can tell you here in South Kingstown and here in my former district and most districts across the state, the writing is an area of concern. And it just is. It just is. I mean, and there's many reasons to look at that and consider that, why. But we've been having many intentional conversations around that and what, if anything, are we going to do about that? But it's happening at every school level already. They have dug deeply into their data and they understand it well. And Mr. Littlefield, please add anything that you would.
Oh, and this is, these are the data that as Ms. Meyer alluded to, our principals got these data a while ago. They've been drilling down and working with their school improvement teams to develop goals for next year. And they will all have goals that are directly related to reading, writing, and math.
And it's a story, right? I gave you a really brief overview, but there's a story and every district has a story and you look at it and what is this story telling us about, who we are and what we're doing with regard to teaching and learning and our students.
I'm actually glad both of you brought up the school improvement team. I know last year, the high school tied its school improvement team goals very closely to these report cards from previous. And I guess I'm curious with this year's school improvement teams, will they be? So it's kind of like two questions. One is when will we know the makeup of our individual school improvement teams? Because I know that's supposed to come in front of us. But then more importantly, will they be reporting out their goals to us for moving forward with this data and their goals?
It sounds like there's interest on the committee that you'd like to meet them and you'd like to hear from them, and we can absolutely arrange that.
Set. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, please.
I had one more question. I was, the sheet that you provided to us, after the fact was in the deck that was printed out, but given to us. I noticed it, I don't know if it's an anomaly or what, but I noticed on the grade between the grade 5 and grade 6 scores on RICAS mathematics. Went from 31.4% in grade 5 to 57.1% in grade 6. It's one cohort that produced both those scores.
Correct. That's the same kiddos.
All right, so that's a pretty big jump. So I was wondering if that could be something you could dig into as a why that was such a big jump, which was wonderful. And how can we repeat that? Because we're talking about 26 percentage point jump in their scores. So it seems pretty significant compared to the other jumps or other changes I've seen in here. There's, another 16% jump somewhere, but that one struck out to me as like being particularly, impressive jump. And, just want to see if we can repeat that somehow.
Understand that. Absolutely. And I think, and thank you for mentioning that because I was really remiss and I'm gonna defer to Mr. Littlefield quickly because we had two schools that were RICAS superstars and highlighted by the Rhode Island Department of Education. You may have seen the videos, Broad Rock and West Kingston.
And Broad
And
Rock
it
is,
was
Broad Rock is one of them. And, if you follow those cohort diagonal lines, you'll see that, that from grade 4 to grade 5, we went from 39.8 in grade 4 to 53.1, and from grade 5, 31.4 to 57. And the Department of Ed picked up on that right away and sent their communication team down because they wanted to interview Principal McNeese and members of her staff to find out what was it that you did. And I was impressed with the way that they utilized their math interventionist to identify the kids who needed a boost, and then worked creatively in their schedules to get extra math time in those students' schedules over the course of the year. And it was just, I could tell you, it was very rewarding for them, and it was very rewarding for the folks at West Kingston equally to see that growth. And Ride recognized it. If you haven't seen the video, it's really inspiring to hear students and teachers and their principal talk about the effort they made.
I appreciate that. Well, yeah, it's great. It's definitely a bright point in all this.
Just had a question to you. So there's of course a line on COVID years, right, where we didn't do testing and then the dip after that. And I'm wondering, when you look, as you showed, you can dig into the details of every question. If there are areas that we can attribute to that remote learning more than where there are things that you just can't teach that way, and that is where we need to focus because we had these COVID years and we know, like, maybe, I don't know if it's writing or other things that we would expect to see that dip because of the way kids learned at a certain age in a certain way.
That's a great question. And absolutely that, and that one slide that I had in here with regard to the item analysis, that's where we look for that information. And then there are other things to respond to that, as you mentioned it. When we look at even and the writing is a piece of that with regard to the COVID years. But if we start to take a look at specific questions and where we had a smaller percentage of students responding correctly, that told us another story as well. An example would be at the elementary level, geometry in particular, questions that are labeled a geometry question, geometry and operations. We found that as part of the curriculum, we weren't getting to that prior to the RICAS assessment, and you have to adjust accordingly when you come to those realizations as you look at the data.
I was on the Peacedale School Improvement Team coming out of COVID, and teachers on the set said, well, when we were looking at RICAS data, said, well, we just didn't teach that, right? We had a shortened year, and they were amazed that any kids got any questions right because it was just not something they got to, geometry specifically. The other question I had is about the cohorts we're looking at. It seems like we look at the economic economically disadvantaged and kids with disabilities in most of these comparisons? Are those the areas where we have the greatest concern? Are there other cohorts where, because RIDE has all sorts of options, has, looks like 10 different categories you can look at probably. So, but for us, is that where our focus needs to be?
Yes. The answer to that is yes. Economically disadvantaged are differently abled students. And then even, when I pulled that slide of the race data that we have in there too, I think we need to have our eyes on that as well.
And one more, and economically disadvantaged, we used to say kids who receive free and reduced lunch. Are there additional measures going into that, or is it's the big
Generally
kids?
that, yeah.
Okay.
And then that speaks to a whole nother story because you need to make sure you're collecting, you're getting that information and good information.
Right. When everyone had free lunch, there was no point in applying for.
Right. That's right. Couple of questions. You're gonna ask me a math question.
I'm not gonna ask you a math question, I promise. Well, I won't promise that.
Go ahead.
So this is just the teacher in me. And even though it's ELA, and I probably don't understand the questions myself and probably couldn't answer them. The page that you showed, that item analysis.
Yep.
Do you know if on a statewide basis, if they're looking at problems that like a huge majority of kids didn't get, that maybe it's something wrong with the item as opposed to the learning behind it?
That's a, it is really a great question and, which I certainly don't have nearly the expertise to look at it, but they come out with a technical report, a very detailed technical report, RIDE, that gives you some, I learned to understand it at some level, some sense of how kids are responding to the question, like a statistical analysis is exactly what happens in that technical report. So yeah, that they do that, actually.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. I got a couple of questions for you. So I'm moving forward to the graph with the math, the grades 3 through 8 on the RIDECast. And, we all know that the grade 8 is down there. So knowing pretty much the content of what's taught in 7th grade and 8th grade and then 9th grade, is this low percentage score in the 8th grade math, is that something that we saw like broadly across the state, or is that something that was, like kind of isolated to a couple of districts? Because I know that, all right, this is where my brain is going here. Some of the concepts and things that are taught in the 8th grade are very abstract, and some kiddos are just not ready for that in the 8th grade. And I'm wondering if that kind of score reporting was found like more widely than our district.
I'd have to look at
I didn't expect
yeah.
you to answer it now, but that's what my, having spent my sentence of 5 years teaching 8th grade. I just wondered. And lastly, a comment, like the star ratings of our schools, I know they can always be better. Everything can always be better. Even professionally, when I get my evaluation, I'm like, can you please tell me something I can do better? But that improvement in the scores, that huge improvement that we saw between grades at the 4 and 5 and 5 and 6, and the general star ratings of our schools, those things did not happen by accident. They happened because of a lot of hard work that went behind that on our educators' part and on our kiddos' part, and they deserve a pat on the back.
Thank you for saying that, and I echo what you have said. In my very short time here in this district, it's been a pleasure, and I am really, really impressed and grateful for the work on behalf of the principals in this district and the teachers. and all staff.
Thank you. There's one more item on the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to introduce to you tonight two gentlemen who are here representing the New England Development Council, otherwise known as NESDEC, with whom we have contracted to conduct the executive search for your next superintendent of schools. You'll recall that the committee back in December selected NESDEC, their proposal. So with us tonight, Dr. David DeRossi, he's the executive director who has served as superintendent of schools in several districts in the Boston area, in Malden and in Saugus, as well as principal at Revere High School. And recently he served as superintendent of schools in Raymond, New Hampshire. He has his bachelor's degree from Northeastern University, a master's degree from Salem State University, and his doctorate in urban leadership from the University of Massachusetts in Boston. With him is Dr. Victor Mercurio, who's currently serving as an associate professor at Johnson & Wales University. Prior to joining Johnson & Wales, he served as superintendent of schools on the in the East Greenwich Public Schools for over 10 years. He served the Warwick Schools as a high school principal and director of secondary education. He holds his doctorate in educational leadership from Boston College, his master's in education administration from Providence College, and a BA from Boston College. So I will ask them to come forward and introduce themselves and introduce the process that they'll lead us through for our executive search.
There it is. Thank you, Superintendent. It's been a while since I'm recently retired, so I was having the whole flashback with snow days and the apps on my phone. I'm like a mini meteorologist. I can watch the airflow, and it always starts 48 hours before the snowstorm. So thank you for having us here tonight, and thank you for going with NESDEC. NESDEC's been in the business of assisting school districts for over 78 years. We are a New England-based firm. Our offices are in Marlborough, Mass, but we cover from Connecticut to Maine and everything in between. We've been doing searches for many years now, and this is one of the things we offer to our affiliate schools, and we do a lot of other things for them. But tonight, we're here specifically to talk about the work we'll do for the search. And Victor, who many of you know, was once a board member for NESDEC, and in talking with a few other people, I'm new, this is my first year. I started July 1st as the executive director. So I'm trying to really begin to build some more consultants in the field. And I think I found a mini rock star here in the Rhode Island area. So I'm thrilled to have him on board. I want to say a few things to.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I too am a I should say a recovering former superintendent. So it's nice to see you this evening. It's nice to be here. It's also nice to see some very familiar faces. Excuse me, as Mr. Littlefield mentioned, I had the honor and privilege of working with and learning from Mrs. Meyer for 10 years. I actually had the opportunity to work with Mr. Littlefield as well. We were on the Commission for Public Secondary Schools for NEASC a number of years ago. And actually, I sat in the seat that he sat in Warwick, as he mentioned, prior to him taking it. So I don't live too far from here, a little north in North Kingstown. So it's an honor to be with you this evening. So thank you.
So again, thank you. And we'll be your team through the entire search process. So if you don't mind, I'll just packets were given. I'll run through my talking points, and then if you have any questions, so you can stop me in the middle, just save them for the end of the way. So right now, the idea is what we bring to the table is meeting and planning. So our job right now NASDAQ's job, your consultant's job is to work with the school. We're going to be here to help you design a search that will help you get the best candidate to bring in as superintendent. And the whole piece to this is we really do work in collaboration with the school committee. And what we then do is meet several times. We have drafted a timeline. I'll speak a little bit about that for the next step. We help by, I think our reach for candidates is what makes NASDAQ somewhat unique. We have a national and regional publication of vacancies. We send out personalized information letter. We'll talk a little bit about what the application letter looks like. We recruit through the National School Development Council also, which will give you a reach out into beyond New England, out into the New York area, Pennsylvania area. We target specific groups nationwide. And we've had applicants from, foreign countries to many states across the United States. We just placed a superintendent in New Hampshire from Missouri. And we had a couple of others actually be brought into interview in Massachusetts as well as Vermont. Advertising is something that we do. It's part of this process. So we advertise on School Spring. We advertise on Top School Jobs. We advertise in AASA online announcements, but we also target the National Alliance of Black School Leaders, Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents, and the Professional Diversity Network. So our outreach is large. Our electronic outreach, in Constant Contact, we have over 10,000 contacts. Constant Contact is how we break everybody down. So we will send your application letter out to superintendents, assistant superintendents, principals, directors, because that's how we break them out in our Constant Contact. And as part of our advertising, it goes out over a 6-week period. And we just keep refreshing the advertisement so it stays constant in the eyes of our people that are watching the NASDAQ website. The recruitment of candidates, that's something we actively do also. So it's important for us to have consultants in the states that we're asking them to work in, because this is a great source right here for recruitment. Of people know the consultants, they'll reach out to the consultants and they'll say, I saw it on NASDAQ. What do you think? Or vice versa. Our consultants will reach out and say, this is a great, are you interested? This is really a great opportunity. So not only do we do the electronic, do the hard copy, we do it all, but we also use our network of consultants to help bring in more applicants.
So an additional part of the process is to develop a candidate profile. And part of that process is conducting up to 4 focus groups. One of the things that we've seen in the past, especially in the past couple of years post-COVID, is that the hybrid approach to conducting those focus groups tends to get more wider stakeholder input. We also, while that process is going on, we also have a survey that will go out to get additional stakeholder community input as well. Once we get the input from the focus groups, we're able to, and I was just talking to Dr. DeRusi about this earlier today. It seems like I'm doing this all the time now in the spring semester with my own doctoral students who are doing a qualitative analysis of their own data, is that we will look at all the data, pull themes from that data, and then subsequently develop a candidate profile we'll use.
Then the use of the candidate profile will assist the screening committee as they begin the process of reviewing applicants and who they choose to move forward just for the screening process. I think at this point, it's to make it clear, you will break into screening committee, but the school committee has the final approval and pick. So the role of the screening committee truly is to do just that. They will screen, paper screen the applicants. They will decide how many they would like to move forward to bring into interview, and then they will make that decision on who the finalists would be to move forward to the full committee. And that's a process that we'll talk about in the next meeting when Victor and I are back, because the screening committee really does the bulk of the work. It's a very important process, and we put a lot of attention to that with you. We're down in person for those. We'll work with you, your screening committee, and we'll make sure that process is smooth. The other thing is, as I said, we do administer the search details. We handle all that. We work closely with our liaisons, and that's something we'll talk about briefly right now. At some point, sooner than later, we would like, meaning NASDAQ, I speak as we, a liaison from the school board who would be our contact person moving forward. And we always ask for that person to be our voice. If we will often get questions about searches, we don't answer for the district, we send it back to that person. But that school committee liaison will be the person that Victor will be dealing with directly. We'll have quick meetings in between the big meetings when we're back here. As packets of information come out, like the one you saw here tonight, we send other packets like that. It would go to that person to help disseminate amongst the groups that need to see it. And we'll go into more details on screening committee development at another meeting, but you can have a school board member on a screening committee and a school board member as a liaison, and it's not a problem. We actually advise to have at least one school committee member on the screening committee. You get more than one, just can't have a quorum. So our process here is pretty flexible to your needs. We'll be meeting, talking, and we advise. We will look at you and help you develop the best, most successful search we possibly can. And again, with that, as you can see in the packet, with our proposal, we also offer a warranty. So should anything go wrong, we hope it doesn't, that we would come back at cost and help you do this again if needed. So that's really the big overview, the packets there. There is a timeline attached. It's a blank timeline. Searches run roughly 120 days. So you can look at that timeline with the arrows and the milestones. The next one, I've already started to draft it. Victor will review it. We'll send it out where we would like to be back in front of you on February 6th to go over the next phase of this, which would be the development of the actual search process.
And, excuse me, at that time, would you want to know who that liaison person to you will be?
I would like, as soon as possible, to know who the liaison is now so that I can send this packet to them, talk with them prior to that February 6th meeting. And then, but the homework would be start to think about who you're going to put on search committee. The next packet of information you get will outline all that. We give you templates to use. And the process right now would be to help you build an application letter and then help you put together that screening committee. And when I spoke with the superintendent, I know you have budget coming up. So the bulk of the search work in this draft will happen after ballot. So we'll be advertising and posting the job while everybody's working through their budget system.
Thank you. I
Are we missing anything from the packet? Because I didn't see a timeline or anything.
I'm sorry.
Are we missing things from the packet?
Oh, I apologize. We sent something that looks similar to this. Give you mine and we'll make copies. We'll send that out to you again.
Electronic, can we just get an electronic? Do you? did you-
I sent it electronic.
Yeah,
Yes,
as long as.
this should have
it's in
been
our
written.
email. Yeah,
I apologize.
yeah, it's not your.
The one we drafted with actual dates and timelines when all these events will happen could be out as soon as I go back and we review it again. I could probably get it out to the beginning of next week, Monday or Tuesday.
Question too. So in the creation of the candidate profile, you've got the focus groups and the survey. What's the, so is the liaison or what's the school committee's role in the creation of that profile?
Actually, what the creation of the profile will be based on the feedback we get from the focus groups in the survey. So then we pull it all together. We create, based on that data coming back, we will then put in 4 themes. We submit everything to you as a draft. The school committee approves everything. So all that will be reviewed by the school committee, approved by the school committee, and then that becomes a document that will help drive the search.
And then on the screening of applications, is there a point, do you review them first? So, I mean, we have a screening committee, but do you say, well, there's some minimum standard that has to be met before they'll even be considered? So they have to be qualified. They have to have the ability to get certified to be a.
We check
Right.
for all that, but if, let's say, 20 candidates apply, we would filter through all that, but all 20 would go to the screening committee. It's never been NASDAQ's belief that we should be saying, Dave is not a good choice for.
I guess my question is more, if you saw someone who say, this is a person who the state is not going to allow to be a superintendent, like they just don't have the minimum qualifications to have the job.
Well, you have to, yes.
You would tell it, right? You would-
Yes, well, you would have to be able to be, either have the current cert or be certified.
Right.
And we check for that in the application process.
Okay.
The issue that we have is that it's not down for official action on the agenda. So as far as like appointing a point person with a vote that would carry, we can't do that. We can't appoint that tonight. In the meantime, I would submit that you send, I'm just gonna take the lead on this. That you send the packets to Mr. Littlefield. We will make sure that going for at the next meeting that it is down for discussion action, then we can finalize it at that point in time. But we'll be walking a line and I'd rather not know it.
That, I was just going to leave my card with my email address with the chair so that she at any given moment when the time was right, all right, we'll continue to go through the superintendent.
Time being, I would recommend to the committee that the packets continue to go to Mr. Littlefield. And again, just so we are steer way clear of any potential OMA violations, that the next meeting we can put down discussion action for a point person or establishing a committee board or however the committee would like.
But the reality of that is that we don't normally do a vote when we're putting somebody in a position to be a liaison or a committee member. So I'm gonna just go ahead at this point and ask and see who's interested in volunteering to be this liaison person. Okay, so could I could make a recommendation of who really first came to mind for me was Miss Better. I would like to ask her if she had the time to volunteer to be that liaison person.
It would be my pleasure. Thank you.
Without a vote, I would appoint Miss Better. Miss Better is your liaison.
I will give her my card right now and we'll be in touch as I will with.
Thank you. Thank you, Miss Better.
Are there any other questions or?
Is there any further questions? No.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. That was the last item on the superintendent's report. Do we have a motion to approve the superintendent's report?
The superintendent's report.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes. Next item on the agenda is school committee business, and we have a discussion and action on a field trip for the SK High School CTE Studio Art Museum visit.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Ms. Saborio was planning on being here tonight, but had some urgent family business to attend to. She hoped that the fact that she's conducted this field trip to New York City several times before without incident, and it's been that it's been a valuable learning experience, that she would be able to get school committee approval to conduct this trip to New York City on April 5.
Ms. Russo?
I'm sure this is taken care of, but I just want to mention that I think this is a wonderful field. But I'm concerned that no student is denied the ability to go because they can't pay the $75.
Well, they wouldn't be able to schedule the trip unless that was the case. So I can assure you that no one will be no one in the program will be excluded because of cost.
Thank you.
So I know there's funds for field trips like this, since it's to an art museum through the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts. Has Mrs. Florio been given the information so that if there's funding for this particular kind of program, it'd be great to follow.
I can tell you that I just got that notice recently and forwarded it. So I'm sure they're going to look at it to get the money. Yes.
Knowing Miss Saborio fairly well and her passion and the department's passion for their students, I'm not worried about them taking care of dotting all their i's and crossing all their t's. So I'd like to make a motion to support and approve the field trip for the SKHS CTE Studio Art Museum visit.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes. Next item on the agenda is a discussion and action on the 2024 Rhode Island Student Survey. Is that Miss Heidi? Is that why you're here, Kamala?
That is correct. Yes, ma'am. That I know that this is a survey that has been administered in the district before and provides critical information. However, school committee approval is needed in order for us to move forward.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. I'm just here if you have any questions that I can answer. Thank you very much, Superintendent. This is something that we have done in the district since I started here in 2016. That's when the survey first started. Unfortunately, in the last iteration in 2022, only the middle school, the 8th graders only participated. We had a little hiccup getting it done in the high school. I believe the person who was taking charge of it was on leave. So if I can answer anything, I'd be more than happy to.
Oh, I have a question for you. Is this the student survey we talked about last night?
Yeah.
In the well-being collaboration? It is.
Yes,
Okay,
it is.
awesome.
So it's a statewide survey that's being done pretty much probably February till June. School.
And
departments
all
have
other
that.
schools to date their students are taking the survey.
So in 2022, over 20,000 students throughout Rhode Island took the survey. This year, actually, they're expecting more because Providence has now signed on. Providence used to do their own surveys, and now Providence will be part of this.
Awesome. Ms. Better?
So is it a mandatory that students take it, or is there an opt-out if a parent doesn't want their child to take it? How does that work?
So it is not mandatory. A letter did go to the superintendent and to the school committee from the Rhode Island BHDDH, Behavioral Health Developmental Disabilities in Hospitals, the Department of Ed, and Department of Health, highly suggesting that schools do administer it. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
If parents want to opt out for their students?
There's a passive consent. So yes, they can opt out.
So, receiver?
And there's not a lot of information in the packet. And what is it surveying exactly? Like, what is the student survey? I guess maybe I don't know. I have the same information some others do, but what is it?
So it's a survey of risk and prevalence for middle school and high school students on certain factors and conditions that expose students, I'm going to read it exactly, expose students that are associated with negative behavioral health outcomes. So it really is telling us information about substance use, alcohol, marijuana, vaping, bullying, suicidal ideation, mental health. So it's incredible knowledge to have. And then with, obviously, I know how supportive you are of data. With that data then comes funds into our communities to help support our children.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds great. I'm also curious just what grades this applies to. Maybe you mentioned earlier, but I forgot.
Normally we've done it in grades 8 through 12.
8 through 12. Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
Make a motion to approve the administration of the Rhode Island Student Survey.
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice seeing you, Heidi. The agenda is selection of a firm to conduct the equity audit. I'll turn that over to,
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the 2023 school year, the committee put out a request for proposals for firms offering to conduct a full equity audit of our school department and set aside funds for such an audit. In 2023, the committee took no action on those proposals due to the fact that they were either too expensive and exceeded the budget, or they did not meet the standard of thoroughness that you expected. Our fiscal year 2024 budget contains funds again set aside for an equity audit for our school district. A request for proposals was published this fall, and then shortly after Thanksgiving, we received 9 different proposals from firms to offering to complete the audit for the school districts. Those proposals came in two. Each proposal came in 2 separate envelopes. One was the proposal for the program that they would offer us, and the other was the budget for that program. Those 9 proposals are secured, unopened in my office. And I would ask the school committee for direction for how you would like to proceed here. I'll offer you a couple of choices. You can take on the task yourselves to evaluate the proposals along with the budgets, and then take action if you see fit to choose a particular vendor. You could, 2, place the onus on the school department, the superintendent's office, to evaluate and make recommendations to this committee for your approval. Or three, ask the school department to assemble a team, including members of the community and the teaching staff, to evaluate the proposals and make recommendations to the committee. Or four, some other course of action that you would like to take, but I'm in need of some direction from the committee here.
Start from the end of the table and work my
So-
way up.
I think, I'm glad we got 9. That's a great response. I think personally for the committee, I think I would like more than one choice and less than 9. And to me, I think the most sensible way to go about that is probably the most inclusive and transparent way to go about it, which sounds like your last choice, to assemble a group of people, faculty, the staff, teachers, members of the public, make sure there's diversity within that group, of many different kinds of diversity with that group, and ask them to review those proposals. I think keeping the costs separate for that group would be wise. So they're really looking at programmatically at what we're doing. Ultimately, we might have to we need more than one to come here, because we might have to rule some out because they just far exceed our budget when we find out what the budget is. But I think we need probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 choices that come before us in my thinking.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Brad here. I think having the community involvement, having teacher involvement is important in deciding who's going to do this equity audit. I know we have community members and members of our staff that have vested interest or a real strong interest in making sure this happens, and to give them a say in which firm we select, I think is going to be beneficial all around for engagement with our community. And I agree with Brad that I think having less than 9 is good, and I think 3 is a really good number to work from. So I'll give us some leeway. If we have some different price points in there, we can work around that. So I agree with that. I think door number 3 is a good choice. So I'm in favor of that.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. I think the makeup of the committee is key. You do want it to be diverse enough. I also think that it needs to be somebody that understands somebody on that committee needs to understand the history of where we've been. In order to really get to some of the systemic problems that we have, a lot of them are so deep rooted. I think somebody that understands that is really important. So, but I do agree that that's probably the really good way forward.
I don't disagree with anything that my colleagues have said and would support that general concept. On the flip side, I think because of some of the conversations that have happened in this community about why there is a need for this audit, I do appreciate that our current leadership is neutral to that conversation and would appreciate that lens, at least bringing us forward with 3 potential qualified candidates to then come before this body and any interested parties who would like to do it. I assume that would be public. I don't oppose the idea of the third and larger entity, but I do have some concerns. I think we need a clear definition of what we need. I know it's in the RFP, but what do we mean by the study? What do we need, and how does it relate to the data that I think our current leadership is most aware of at the moment? We've identified those trends, and I think we need people who are well educated on that information to be able to work with an equity firm to make the selection of data. If we do move to a committee, I do think there needs to be representation from the school committee as well, and I'd be happy to serve.
You share the perspective that 9 is not ideal, and to pare it down to the 3. I don't necessarily disagree with the perspective of putting it out to a kind of a task force subcommittee. However, I believe that our body was elected by the people to lead. And I feel like our school committee is capable of making a selection. I do think personally, I think that I trust our administration and I trust the folks that you all lean on. I personally think that you all could pare it down to 3 and then pass that on to our body to assess, look at, and also do a cost, including the cost, and then making a selection here at the table. Again, just my perspective of it. And I also believe that time is of the essence. This discussion has been going on for years. And I believe that I would rather us move thoughtfully but rapidly to get a firm in and to get this audit going as soon as possible.
I agree with what they all said about paring the 9 down to 3. I prefer the idea of a diverse team. And I do echo Ms. Messini's comments that time is of the essence.
I do agree with what was being said down there, and I also agree with Ms. Messinesi that time is of essence. However, because this has been an ongoing conversation amongst our community, and it has been a diverse conversation, I was hoping to put the community in charge of narrowing it down to those 3 individuals and then presenting to the committee to make a choice from there. And that's just, that's my thought process, is to give it to those who, I feel see the most, which is our educators and leaders inside of our buildings. But with that, we have to take a vote on this. So there's going to need to be Mr. Receiver.
I just wanted to apologize. I just wanted to just get a sense of what do we think is going to be the turnaround time if we do put a committee on it? Because I do share Ms. Massaniti's concerns about the timing of it. We want to get it done and soon. Could we put some parameters around that committee, that's task force, I guess you could say, to say it's got to be decided on within a certain period of time? Because I don't want them to get into endless discussions and have it go on for meeting after meeting after meeting and not come to consensus. So in light of the time aspect of it, I'm wondering, is there any kind of time-bound element we can put around their decision?
So
Before you answer that, can I also ask, is there going to be a framework around how that's going to look? How do we choose the task force that is put together? How do they determine, is there a rubric that they're going to determine to make sure their interview questions so it's a very in-depth, if we go a school committee, a subcommittee / task force team approach?
I just like to remind us that we can go through motions before we come to the consensus of what we're going to do, right? It's not a 1 person, it's a 7 body. So if there's 1 or 2 motions that have to come to the table for us to get to that vote, that's fine. I do share the concerns. I mean, having it spoken out loud, I do share the concerns about, is there gonna be some parameters around that, right? And who we choose. So maybe the motion that's put forth by whomever down there is the motion. And I will let Mr. Littlefield speak because I think he was trying to.
No, I think I would say a month's time, we would within a month, we would be able to A, recruit a team, B, create a rubric, C, open open the proposals and then D, bring you a recommendation of 3 choices for you to evaluate.
So would it be reasonable to ask the committee to return to the March 12th meeting?
Yes, I think that's perfectly reasonable.
No, I think that is a great way forward. I do trust our administrators to put a team together that is broad enough. I know I have had some conversations with the assistant superintendent. I know how I know that we communicated the needs for this audit successfully to them. So I place the trust in them to put together this team and come up with a rubric, and I think that's a great suggestion.
With that said, do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a I'd like to make a motion to create a, we call it subcommittee or task force? Task force, okay. I'd like to make a motion to create a task force to review the selection of the firm for the equity audit and return to the subcommittee or to the full committee with the 3 options for us to review by March 12th.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so should the motion say charge the superintendent to have the administrative team put together this task force? Yeah. Okay, so what should we do?
You would amend, well, I mean, you
I'll amend my motion to add that I'd like to direct the superintendent to create that task force.
Okay.
Second the amendment.
Okay, Mr. Bradley Shea. Mr. James Restivo.
Aye.
Ms. Carol Better,
Aye.
Miss Melissa Boyd,
I just hoped we were doing discussion before we took the vote, so I just want to pause.
I'm sorry.
We're allowed to do that. I would just hope that we also could see the list of who those individuals are. And I know we have a process to select committee members for subcommittees. It doesn't have to mirror that, obviously, in our bylaws, but I support the rubric idea and would love to see that rubric as well coming forward when we are then able to use hopefully the same rubric to make that evaluation. So I just wanted to add those notes that we would be able to have that process be transparent so that others who might want to be involved in the process who are not perhaps selected would understand what the process was.
Just to add about the rubric, I assume we would start with the RFP and what the RFP asked for and who met those requirements. That's really fundamentally how we should be judging the responsive.
I do what it would be appropriate to at this time to recognize the work that Mr. Crowley did working as our interim CFO back in the fall. He did create a good number of contacts who were able to provide input to him as he wrote the RFP. And when the RFP is very conducive to creating a rubric for evaluating each proposal.
So I have a procedural question. Do we vote on the amendment first and then the motion, or is the amendment now part of the motion and we're just voting on the motion?
You are voting on the motion as amended. Ms. Bristow I don't.
No, that's Boyd.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
So if we're returning to voting, I will vote aye.
Aye.
Ms. Busa?
Aye.
Aye. Is that national? The motion passes.
I know.
So next item on the agenda is the resolution in support of the speed cameras in the school zone. That is a discussion and an action as well.
This I would remind the committee, we entertained Chief Moynihan here at our last meeting, who presented his desire to utilize speed cameras in our school zones, and he presented a good deal of data to support the need for that. And the school committee asked that Mr. Pollock develop a resolution to support the chief's efforts, and that resolution is before you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the submission of a resolution in support of the speed cameras in school zones as presented in the resolution attached, and present that to the town council in support of Chief Moynihan's initiative.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. That motion passes. Next item on the agenda is a second read on the SKSD purchasing policy number 3205.
This is a second read, and I will I want to recognize Mr. Kilpatrick for his efforts in helping us to update this policy. I did dismiss him earlier this evening as Mrs. Kilpatrick is expecting a child, not in labor yet, but she is expecting any minute. And so I wanted to make sure that he hustled home. This is a second read for the purchasing policy. The operative clauses are the updating of the minimum or updating the purchase amounts to reflect inflation. The last time that this policy was revised was in 2003, and so Mr. Kilpatrick applied the inflation formula to those updated amounts.
Let's pause. Ms. Vedder?
I knew Brad had some concerns during the first reading. I just wondered if he feels that they've been satisfactorily taken into account.
Yeah, and I've actually, he had emailed me versions of them. So we had some discussions between us about those changes.
Okay, so that said, if there's no further discussion on the second read for this policy, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the purchasing policy number 3205.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. Item F under school committee business is school building committee update. That will go over to Ms. Messy.
So I appreciate that this is kind of a main topic that stays on our agenda going forward at this time, because we're starting to really get into into action with our school building committee at the moment. Last night I attended the town council meeting where we requested that a town council member be appointed to and I'm going to be reading from an update. So that is why I'm looking at my phone right now. So there's a design team selection, and the design team consists of the architect and engineer that will hopefully be working with us as we move forward in prep for and up till the bond. And then hopefully with a successful bond, be moving forward with us. In order to select, we have, I believe it was 9 applicants. Some pretty major firms are very interested in coming to South Kingstown and working with us from all over. So we need to narrow that number down. And so we're putting together a design team a design selection team who will screen the 9 applicants and pare them down and bring probably 3 to the school building committee, who then will do their assessments and make recommendation to the school, the school committee and the town council going forward. But we needed to move on the process. So last night, we requested that they appoint a town councilor, which I just want to make note of that. We didn't have to include a town councilor. RIDE allows for the school building committee to make the final decision, but we as a school building committee decided we would like to have community members as part of that. And also to have the town have a voice at the table as well. So we wanted to be, again, it was kind of all encompassing. Our timeline is tight as per usual. This coming Thursday, January 25th at 4 o'clock in the town hall, we will be selecting the interview selection team. So we know out of the gate that it's going to be 4 members of the school building committee. We have put the request out to the community for 2 community members. And I believe we received 10 interested parties. And so we're going to be reviewing the community members, and then the town council last night appointed Mr. Mike Marin as the town council representative, which is wonderful, considering his experience being on the school committee itself and also being very invested in the school facilities projects previously. So I'm sorry, we received 6 proposals from qualified architectural teams. Each proposal is between 125 and 200 pages long. So they take approximately 90 minutes to read, which is why we would like a team to pare those down. The responsibility of the selection team will be looking at staff qualifications, capability, capacity, and qualifications of the offerer, the work plan, project approach, and methodology. There will be a scoring sheet, and it will all be done again by this small interview team. Let's see. I believe that is it. That meeting that we will take place on Thursday, this coming Thursday, is scheduled to go a little bit longer than normal. We usually shoot for an hour, but it's scheduled to go from 4 to 5:30, town hall chambers. Again, public is always welcome to join. But after that, we're going to immediately the following Thursday have another meeting. And we're really going to be starting to have more frequent meetings, have more frequent updates, and really move along so that we can get ready for the bond. And again, as long as we have a positive vote on the bond, then we're already be hitting the ground running and just keeping on moving. So.
Thank you, Kate, for that update. Okay, last item on the agenda is the discussion and action in regards to our subcommittees. So subcommittees, they're up and running, but not all of them. So and we talked about how some of our subcommittees needed other members. I know that there has been a recent shift in leadership for subcommittees. So Terry put together this little, this document and passed it out to us today. And what she's looking for is for us to put down any members, which are teachers, administrators, anybody that you see missing on the list, but that is a part of your subcommittee, and kind of narrow it down coming to the next school committee meeting of how many members you need, or if your committee has enough.
The
Mr.
wellness
Chair?
committee isn't here. Is it? Oh, I didn't see this. I got it. Oh, I'm sorry.
Because I just think it's really important that we start to get those committees going that are not going. And we,
Thank you. I just want to address the Education Accountability Subcommittee. I think the problem with this was it was misnamed. So the year before, we had a redistricting subcommittee, so that when we consolidated the elementary schools and we redistricted, that work was done in the subcommittee. And then when that work was done, the subcommittee was done. So the Education Accountability Committee was put together for the single purpose of consolidating the middle schools and closing Curtis Corner. So to that end, the administrators were the middle school administrators. The teachers that were on it were middle school teachers. The parents had a vested interest. They had current middle school students. So it's not like we're equipped as a subcommittee to take on other tasks because it's so focused on that middle school. So in my opinion, and James sat on it with me and Kate did for a small period of time, but in my mind, it's like it was put together for a particular task. It was definitely needed to do that task, but it's kind of done. And so I don't think we need to have it as a standing committee. If you truly want an accountability subcommittee, that's a discussion we can have, but the makeup of this committee is not conducive to that kind of work. It was an amazing subcommittee task with a very specific charge. They did an amazing job, but I think now the work is done.
thank you for clarifying that. And I believe because it was a subcommittee that was put together for a specific task, that there's no need for it right now. Okay, so we'll take that or, and then Ms. Russo?
So I just have two comments with regard to the subcommittees. So CELAC by law is a parent committee. It's not a subcommittee of the school committee. It's a parent committee, and there is, I don't think there's a requirement on how many people serve on it. But what I've seen, so historically in my time on the school committee, there has just been one school committee member to act as a liaison to that subcommittee. It is not a subcommittee of the school committee. So I'm not sure how we address that. And I also don't know if they have to file agendas with the AG's office like we do. And I think that needs some clarification about the laws. And that said, I think the other thing that everyone needs to realize is that by law, when these subcommittees meet, those agendas still have to be filed 48 hours in advance of that meeting. And so I think we also need some kind of a plan going forward of making sure that those agendas get set and delivered to Ms. Marshall so that they can be filed with the Secretary of State's office to keep us legal.
Ms. Mattson.
On that topic, I think if each subcommittee can, we've been, and, you know, I've done it myself with the budget, subcommittee and with the school building committee. We basically set the next meeting at the previous meeting. But if we could get into a regular cadence, and have like a calendar and be like, okay, budget is going to be the third Wednesday of the month. Policy is going to be the second Monday of the month, whatever it is, even though they may be subject to change depending on weather, depending on attendance. If we can get into a regular cadence we can, you know, Terry can at least know when to expect the agendas. Similar to what we do with the school committee. It's like, you know, that it's going to be, you know, the second and the fourth Tuesday of every month. So, you know, the second and the fourth, or the first and the third Thursday of every month, you need to get your agendas in. So I think if we, as the leaders of these subcommittees, can do that for Terry, that's the least we can do, because she's a rock star. Every time last minute, I'm texting her saying, please, can you post this because I forgot. So, that's kind of really all I have to say on these in particular, outside of the fact that while yes, wellness is, and that's on the second page, it is a standing subcommittee. It is by law that we have to have it, as per Rhode Island general law. Say that again?
The wellness.
How big does it need to be?
No, not how big does it need to be. How many meetings?
Oh, how many meetings? So by law, we were mistaken in previous years. We thought by Rhode Island law, you had to meet at least 4 times a year, a school year. But that ended up being it was our own wellness policy that was requiring it. So that can be altered. It just needs to meet, and the wellness policy,
Yes,
if I'm
we
not
do.
mistaken, we did a really good job of updating the last version of it to refer to Rhode Island general law instead of putting specific details in. It was like, so that it would always stay up to date with Rhode Island and federal laws.
Mhm.
But it needs to be reviewed every 3 years. And reapproved by the sitting board. But it does need to meet at least once a year.
All right.
So, I wonder what, other people on the committee think that, and Mr. Littlefield and Ms. Meyer, what you think about how we could go about getting some, teacher and administrator involvement in some of these subcommittees, like put the word out there that, you know, we could use some teachers, some administrators on policy, on budget, et cetera, and pull it. Unless there's, and I just named those because they're the first 2 on the
I'm
list.
just saying, policy was you don't really want, I don't think teachers should be on policy because they're creating policy.
That's right. It was the second one in the
Yeah, I
list. I
know.
was really.
Budget,
thinking of
yes,
the
I
others.
hear you on budget. I agree with you on budget.
Ms. Boyd.
Michelle, I don't mean to react strongly. I would love to give the information to Terry of who currently is on all of the committees. I know we do have 2 teachers who serve on policy and a community member. So I think filling in the accurate information is a good start, and certainly filling the voids where there needs to be. And then also sharing what dates we do have planned. I know we have monthly meetings for policy planned. I need to do a better job of sharing that with Terry, who is amazing. I echo that. But absolutely. So yeah, I think we are probably all missing some information on here. And if we could make it accurate, that's a good first start.
So I'm just gonna ask I'm just gonna go down this list to confirm that these are all. So budget and finance is very active. Policy is very active. Special education is very active. Transportation is active. School building committee is very active. CLAC, that I am the liaison to that. We will be having a meeting soon. And we are active. And then it's the wellness. Okay, so that covers all of our school building, our school committee obligations as committees, to have committees. We also have on here, we swiped off here, education and accountability. There is a strategic planning. Is that still a committee, or was that put together as a one-time? Okay.
So it was an active committee at the time under Dr. Pilata. And then it served a it was very similar to education accountability in the fact that it served a purpose in the moment under his leadership. When Mr. Prince joined us, he put together his own subcommittees. Strategic planning never reformed, we'll say. I personally feel strongly that it needs to but it may be something that we need to wait until we have our permanent superintendent and permanent assistant superintendent and a director of curriculum, or however that new administration is going to set their leadership up, so that, but we need a strategic plan in this community, in this districts. But I'd be remiss in tasking Mr. Littlefield, Ms. Meyer with this as they're planning to pass the torch on to another set of leaders. So I don't know what the rest of the committee feels about that, but I do feel strongly we need it. It's just the timing and then who's on it.
I'm not disagreeing, we need it. I'm just curious how that fits in with the building directed school improvement teams. Do we need a strategic planning committee above that, kind of oversee, like, I guess, where does it fit in with the building directed school improvement?
I think they're two different things. I don't know, Michelle, if you would, I know you.
So the district needs a district strategic plan. And the way I understand it, and please throw something at me and shut me up if I'm going down the wrong way here. But the district needs a strategic plan, and then the school improvement teams from the various individual schools, their strategic plan is supposed to kind of work off the district strategic plan. Kind of not how it is. I agree with Ms. Massananti that it's a vital committee, but I also agree that I think we need to put it on hold for now until because the rumor has it that Mr. Littlefield and Ms. Meyer are not staying with us forever. As much as that's a difficult.
I will say,
pill to
I had a
swallow.
little Girl Scout cookie salesperson at my door asking if y'all would stay, just.
Do have the Augusta has it, that scholarship committee is full running. Legislative, that's Michelle and I, and then the school improvement teams, which is individual schools. So, okay. All right.
Maybe if people could, from the individual teams, could, as Ms. Whitford indicated, could like fill in the missing information and then give that written fill in the blanks to Ms. Masha, so we could, get this into a better place.
And so for the committee, community members, you want the actual names of the people serving in those roles, is that correct?
I think that's it for the night, folks, and let's get a motion on the table to adjourn. Ms. Betty, did you have something? No? Are you waiting for the
We're-
motion?
We're ready
I
to
move to adjourn.
adjourn. Second.
Did somebody make the motion?
She did.
Oh,
I said
okay.
no.
You second? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, let's go home. Good night.